So this is the Sunday before Thanksgiving. So you're rolling into that week. I mean, this is not news for you, hopefully, but we're rolling into the week here, and depending how your family and schedule and everything works, coming into a week like this with Thanksgiving may be something you look forward to, like, yes, I get to be with my family and my friends. Or maybe you've got this, oh, shoot, I get to be with my family and friends. It kind of depends on your family dynamic. It might be something you're looking forward to. It might be something that you are not looking forward to. Or for some of us, it's kind of a mix. You know, we got a little bit of both in this whole thing. But somehow you're moving into this thing. And it may be, as we have some friends of ours, maybe you're going to be by yourself. So maybe you don't look forward to that either. But somehow you're moving into this. And I would anticipate, I would hope, that somewhere in this, perhaps particularly on the day that's set apart for it, that you'll be taking time to give thanks. You know, some time where you pause to kind of think about how God has been good to you and how He has provided for you and how He has met you in difficult circumstances, how He has carried you through things, how, all that type of thing, but you're stopping and you're giving thanks. Now, hopefully that's an intentional thing that you put into this. I mean, what better time to really do that on a day of Thanksgiving, right? That should be when we do it. But there's a question that I've been working with. All the way through, I've been chasing this question all week. Started even before the week, but it's particularly leading up to this. I've been thinking this. The question is, as believers, as those who have found new life in Jesus, among the redeemed of God, is there a difference between how we give thanks and how someone who has not yet met Christ gives thanks? You thought about it? I was chasing the question because I was kind of thinking, is there a difference? Seems like there should be. And if there is, what is that difference? Okay, now, think about it with me. Okay, I don't want to drop the answer too fast on you of what I've come to. I want you to have to kind of at least tease it for 10 seconds before we start to move it forward. Like, is there a difference? Should there be a difference? What does that look like? And I think there is. I think there should be a difference. That as those who have come into a new relationship with God through Jesus, that our giving of thanks is to someone we know. So it's not, when we think of Thanksgiving, it's not just a matter of making a checklist or an audit of all that we have and kind of categorizing and putting it all together. Here's what I have, and here's the things that I appreciate in life and all that. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do it. Hopefully everybody does something like that. But as those who have stepped into this new relationship with God, who know Him personally through Jesus, our giving is to a person. The whole idea of thanking, I kind of chase this out even in dictionaries and stuff. Thanking implies that you are thanking someone, right? That's what we say, thank you. Now, it's one thing to appreciate things. It's one thing to be to enjoy things. That's one level. But thanking implies in its very nature that we are thanking someone. And so then you say, well, so particularly if I'm interacting with someone who doesn't know Christ, I kind of played that little adversarial thing with my home group this week. And say, so let's say I'm someone who doesn't know Christ. And you say, yes, I get to say thank you to someone. And I say, so what? What difference does that make? And it makes a difference. It does. Let me play out a little scenario here. let's say that you find out that you have, your kidneys are failing. And it's played out long enough that you've been notified that you're on a ticking clock. And that without a new kidney, you're going to die. So hopefully that isn't your case. But play with me on this. Let's say that was the case. You find that out. And then, as you're getting down close to it, an anonymous donor comes forward and offers his kidney. Anonymous. So you go in and you have the surgeries and stuff, and you come out with this new kidney, and now your prognosis is different. You're not going to die. But you don't know the person. Now, what would be the natural thing that you would want to do? Let me tell you what the natural thing would be. If it's me, and I'm guessing it'd be you would want to find the person to thank him, right? Him or her, whoever it is. You would want to, that would be the thing. I appreciate the kidney. I'm not going to thank my kidney. Thank you, kidney, for being there. But I'd want to find that person who gave that to me, who gave a piece of his or her life to me, and because now that life in me gives me life. I would want to find that person. So we can play it a little bit farther. Let's say somewhere along the way someone says, oh, well, I can give you the person's name. Joe Schmatz. Well, now at least I've got something that ties me. But it's not enough. Because I still can't think. At least I know kind of a person's there, but I don't know the person yet. So I'm still a step short. Maybe even along the way, I find out some more about the person. I find some cool things or whatever about this person, so I know a little bit more about it. But it still doesn't work yet. I'm still short of this thing. I'm longing to be able to thank that person. And then maybe even I find that this person sacrificed greatly to give me this kidney. Cost this person dearly to give this. And so it even amps it up more. But ultimately, what I want to do is to meet that person face to face and thank that person. And thank that person every single day because I can get up and I'm still alive because that person's life is inside me. Now, you tracking with me where I'm going with this thing? I mean, so by now it should be real obvious. But that as those who have found new life in Jesus, it's not just that I walk away saying, okay, good, I'm good now. But it calls for something to happen, a thanking of the person who has given me life, and to do it on a continual basis because that life is part of what allows me to even move and breathe today. So I think that's where the difference is. So I want to take us into a scripture this morning that is, I'm sure, not on anyone's list for Psalms to look at on Thanksgiving Sunday. It's the last place you'd probably go. But it's Psalm 36. Psalm 36. And in this psalm, this is a psalm that David wrote. I think he wrote it toward the end of his life. And so he's got the wisdom that kind of rolls with this whole thing. But in this psalm, it describes two ways of thinking. The two major ways all of us in this world think. There's one way of thinking, and there's another way of thinking, and these are the two big camps here. And so David puts these things together, I should say. God puts these things together, speaks through David, and puts them into this poetic form, into a song that would be sung. So the two break down into the first four verses is the first way of thinking, and then the second one here. Let me read the first way of thinking. It's pretty intense. I mean, as far as the words, I mean, it's like he's using the most extreme words possible. But let's do it. Here's one way of thinking. I'm going to read my translation of it. Yours might start out slightly different, but it's okay. Translators kind of play with that first line. Here's how it says. Transgression speaks to the godly within his heart. There is no fear of God before his eyes, for it flatters him in his own eyes concerning the discovery of his iniquity and the hatred of it. The words of his mouth are wickedness and deceit, for he has ceased to be wise and to do good. He plans wickedness upon his bed, sets himself on a path that is not good. He does not despise evil. Now this, you read that and you think, wow, that sounds like a terrorist or something, or some, mobster. I mean, doesn't it? It sounds like, boy, this is way out there on this far end, but but it's a way of thinking. There's a certain kind of thinking that goes on in here. And the way this starts out, at least the translation I've chosen to use here, it says that transgression, okay, in other words, kind of personifies this, speaks into his heart. There's a certain kind of self-talk that goes on inside this way of thinking. Now, all of us have self-talk that goes on. There's this thing that happens inside all of us where we process, I had to get the numbers in front of me here, we process somewhere between 25,000 and 75,000 thoughts per day. I probably am more on the 25 side. Some of you are probably on the other side of that. You're more the 75. But still, all these thoughts that are being processed inside of it. And most of it happens unconsciously. I mean, it's just kind of what goes on in the back of our head. But some of it is this active thinking where we're processing life and thinking through how this whole thing works. And as you read through this one way of thinking here, it just sounds so extreme out there. And yet, what's happening here is we're getting a glimpse into how all of us tend to think. So now let me reduce it down, because I thought about, okay, if I can reduce it down to some simple lines here, how would I do this? So it doesn't sound quite so extreme. And when I do that, we all go, oh, I get it. Here's how it works. There's three parts to this. First of all, we remove God from the picture. Okay, whether we do it actively or passively, there's a removing of God from the picture. Now, notice what it says here, that there is no fear of God in his eyes. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't believe in God. It's just that God is irrelevant. The God at the moment is moved from the picture. One of my favorite prophets in the Old Testament, a guy by the name of Zephaniah. He's just got the coolest name, big Z on his chest. Zephaniah. He was one who spoke to the urbanites. Okay, he was in Jerusalem. He wasn't one that went out like John the Baptist and went out, roam in the desert or something. He's an urban prophet. And he's speaking to those who are kind of the wealthy power people in Jerusalem. Who they're religious people. But they had bought into all sorts of things. And one was that they had reduced God down and moved him, kind of marginalized him. And at one point, early in that, I think it's in chapter 1 there, he talks about the idea that they had become lethargic spiritually. And they say within themselves, okay, here's the self-talk. They say within themselves that God will not do good or evil. In other words, it just doesn't matter. God is moved to the side. So that's the first thing. He says, just simply moving God out of the picture. Then second part, okay, I've got just three pieces of this. And they all kind of happen at the same time. It's not like one follows, but they all happen. Second one is, you move God from the picture. Secondly, I put myself in his place. I put myself on the throne inside of me. See what he says here? He flatters himself. And flatters himself that hey, I know how this thing works. I'm the one in control. I raise myself up, and I kind of work myself into the picture. I move God out. Somebody's got to sit on the throne. It's me. I put myself there as the own authority in my life. And then third, it says that he redefines the rules. I move God out of the picture, put myself in the place of authority, God's place that should be his, and then I redefine the rules. And that's what a lot of this talks about here, is cease to be wise and do good. And changes all the dynamics of things. Changes in his mind what is right and wrong. It's based on his own opinion now, his own thoughts. I decide what's right and wrong. I decide what's good and evil. I shift everything around, all the values around, so that they work the way I want them to work. And then I set out on a course. Now, see how that, now it sounds more like something we could do. That not as maybe all the time even, but by my tendency is to somehow marginalize God and to put myself in the place of authority and then redefine the rules so that they fit the way I want to live. Now it's a little more scary. But the interesting thing is that what happens when God gives the picture of us, when he says, no, this is what it really looks like. I mean, I can reduce it down to where it's, okay, I get it. But when God says, no, let me give you a picture of what you look like, and takes that x-ray shot, and I look at it, and it comes out looking like this, now I'm going, oh, shoot, this isn't so good, is it? But there's one way of thinking. And when I bring that into the whole idea of giving thanks, if I've removed God from the picture and put myself in the place of him, then when it comes to giving thanks, I've got no one to give thanks to, right? So we end up, when pushed, we kind of use different language, kind of toy around with it. Things like, oh, thank goodness, right? Or, I thank my lucky stars, whatever those are. Or, I'm just fortunate. And then what I'm left with in this giving of thanks, on the best day even, is saying, here's what I appreciate. I don't have someone to thank, but at least I'm enjoying it. And so I come up with things like a list that kind of compares me with everyone else. Yes, my health isn't all the greatest, but it's better than that person. Or I don't have everything that I would like to have, but I have more than that person. Or at least I'm not whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so the list kind of becomes too easily a comparison type of thing, or it becomes an inventory. I'm just kind of going through and saying, what do I have? I list it all out. And that's all bad. It's just that it becomes about that. It becomes about the stuff. It becomes about the object is not God. It's this, whatever this is. Or it can even be reduced down to boasting. Look what I have. Now, all this kind, the inventory, all that kind of stuff, is not totally bad. And you go into the Old Testament, God was constantly calling his people to come and to give thanks. And in doing so, to acknowledge all the goodness that he'd brought into their life. That here's how you have poured this upon me here, and I want to come in and thank you for all this, whatever this is. That's not bad. But when God is removed from the picture and I'm in place of that, my thanks gets reduced down to the stuff. Or to my health or something like that. That's one mindset, one way of thinking. Put that one over here. Now you come to the next one that he puts out there. It's a different way of thinking. There's a lot of imagery that goes into this next one. Listen how it reads here. Starting in verse 5. It says, your loving kindness, O Lord, extends to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains. Your judgments are like the great deep. O Lord, you preserve both man and beast. How precious is your loving kindness, O Lord. The children of men take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They drink their fill of the abundance of your house. and you have given them to drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see light. That's a different way of thinking. The first one, everything's about me. The theme of the first 4 verses is me. The theme of the next set of verses is about God. There's nothing about me in it. It's all about him. It's a different way of thinking in this. And there's a key word that runs through all of it. You notice that there's a repeating word here, which is the word loving kindness. See that in there? It's a treasured word in the Old Testament. It's the Hebrew word hesed. Try and say it. It's hesed. Now you have to say it in a Hebrew way, though, if you're going to do it, though, which means you're almost going to spit on the person in front of you. Because you kind of dig deep and kind of hesed, okay? Go ahead and say it. I want to see you spit. Hesed. Key word. And it's a word that is so difficult to translate that translators finally ended up inventing their own word. You notice if you try and write loving kindness in your Word document, your dictionary will constantly try and correct it. Because there is no such word. Well, yeah, there is. But they put this together because the word carries so much about God's love for us. There's a whole bunch of things going. One of the definitions I came across is this. Ready for it? It's kind of come boom, 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 boom. But I'll do it twice. So if you miss it the first time, I'll catch you on the second round on this, okay? Hesed, in other words, loving kindness. Hesed is the consistent, ever-faithful, relentless, constantly pursuing, lavish, extravagant, unrestrained, furious love of our Father God. How do you like that? Let me do it again. I'll slow it down just a little bit. Probably somewhere along the way as I'm saying this, you're going to capture one of the words and go, that one I like. Hesed. This word that runs through the Old Testament. This word that captures the very heartbeat of God himself is this word. Hesed is the consistent, ever faithful, relentless, constantly pursuing, lavish, extravagant, unrestrained, furious love of our Father God. That's the way he loves you. That's the way he loves me. With that kind of love. And it's a theme word that runs through this. It starts out there in verse 5, just talking about, verse 5 and 6, talking about the expansiveness of it. And he's using this poetic language to kind of give extremes and say, look at how big this is. That your loving kindness, O Lord, extends to the heavens. In other words, it's limitless up there. And then part of it, he's giving kind of subcategories at this point of it. Your faithfulness, which is part of Hesed, reaches to the skies. Your righteousness is like the mighty mountains. In the Hebrew mind, a mountain was a figure of strength and power. Your judgments are like the great deep. They're unfathomable on this thing. And David, as he writes this, is going, this is incredible. The magnitude of your Hesed. But then he moves it to the next and personalizes it even more. He says, how precious is your loving kindness, your Hesed, O Lord. And then he gives us 3 images to work with. Now, remember, it's poetry. And one of the great values of poetic language is that it uses imagery. So you don't have to remember definitions. You're not trying to put a big theological thing stuck in here somewhere, but gives us an image so we can picture this. And you walk away with something that all of our thinking kind of reduces down to imagery anyway. You know, after you do it all this, somehow it gets locked into some kind of a picture or a story form inside of us. And so poetic language kind of beats us to that. So look there's 3 images. First one in this. Before we get to the image, let me put one more thing in here. It says, you preserve man and beast. In other words, ultimately, you are the one that is behind everything we have and everything we are. Backs it right into that. It's all about you. But now it goes into these images. First one is, the children of men take refuge in the shadow of your wings. In the shadow of your wings. Now, I don't know what picture comes to your mind. Probably something comes to your mind right away, right? You can't not think about the shadow of your wings right now. Some kind of imagery comes into there. It's an image that shows up over and over again in the Old Testament scriptures, all the way down into the New Testament. There's an imagery of a mother hen gathering her chicks under her and covering her. So that, like, whether it's in a storm or threatening of some kind, that she gathers them in here and she threatens them, or she covers them and protects them in here. We had an unexpected, unwanted illustration this morning. My wife was walking our dog up in the area we live. She was walking it up the street, and out from one of the houses, a dog comes charging. A rescue dog that is still living the pain of whatever it was before, and comes out and attacks our dog. And so Ruthie's out there trying to do all this stuff, and finally just drops down on the ground and covers our dog. She's got, afterwards you can see the wounds she's got from doing those things. But there's that picture of, I'm going to protect you here. And it runs all the way through the Old Testament scriptures. Ruth, whenever she leaves and comes to Boaz uses this language. You've come to our God, the one to find refuge under the shadow of his wings. David, when he's running from his son Absalom, he cries out, Lord, I desire to find shelter under the shadow of your wings. All the way down to Jesus himself says, how I would have longed to gather you like a hen gathers her chicks under her, but you would not let me. It's that image all the way through of this God that provides a certain security to us that can't come from anywhere else, and we recognize it's from him. Let me add another twist in there. It's not alternate, it's also. This image of finding shelter in the shadow of your wings. Some of those Hebrew scholars would say this, that yes, it's about the hen and her chicks, but it's also an image that goes right into the temple itself. Because within the temple there was the ark with the mercy seat and the angels whose wings covered over it. And it's a picture of finding security at that mercy seat under the shadow of his wings. Both of those are true. But that's part of it. See, so there's this way of thinking that all my protection and your provision for me, as well as my security in life, comes from you. Then there's this next one in here that they drink from the abundance. They drink their fill from the abundance of your house. From the abundance of your house. There's this idea of we come into God's house and there's this feast that is here. Eat up. Now, it kind of plays into this week. I don't know what Thanksgiving meals look like in your home or in your family when you get together. There's probably different ways of approaching it, and maybe you've got some kind of traditional food that you bring into it, or maybe you've got the turkey thing going, whatever it is, and hopefully whoever's cooking it is good at it. They don't mess with the things that you like most and all that stuff. Years ago, we had our Swedish family. I'm Swedish. That's what that looks like. Had our Swedish family with us, and we decided to give them a traditional American meal. And so we thought of Thanksgiving, and we provided, it was all the stuff. There was the turkey, and there was the dressing, there was the mashed potatoes, there's the cranberry stuff. I mean, we did all the stuff like this. They hated it. They said, what in the world? You guys eat this stuff? Because it was just so different from them. But the picture is you come and you have all this to eat. My sister-in-law, Janice, she is one who, her love language, her main orientation in life, everything is providing food and lots of it. And she's a great cook. So whenever you go to Janice's house, regardless of what the meal is, or what you thought you were going to get, there's enough food there to feed an army. I mean, even if there's 4 of you, she cooks for like 25. If there's 25, she cooks for 200. And you come in and there's entree after entree after entree and all this stuff and side things over here. And then you look over at the dessert table and there's pies, cake all over here. And it's just, you go, wow. It's a picture. Come into the abundance of my house and feast on it. That everything that your soul longs for, I will nourish you with so much you can't take it all in. And there's more after that. That's the picture. There's another one here. It's the shadow of your wings. The security that we find in him. There's the abundance that God provides that for everything that we long for in our soul. And then there's the river of his delights. Look at that. You give them to drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. The river of your delights. That language is just cool in itself. What's interesting is the language tracks itself through the scriptures. It goes all the way back to Genesis. In fact, when it mentions delights here, the Hebrew, the base for the word delights is the word Eden. You give us from the Edens, the river of Edens. Because the Eden means delight. And if you go back to Genesis, you find that that this river starts there, this imagery, that there was a river that wells up from the middle of Eden and waters the entire garden and nourishes it and brings life to it, and then goes out into 4 different rivers. You see it again, it tracks down through other places, but one of the next places that I land on is Psalm 46. That we talked about not too long ago, I think. Because it says there that there is a river that makes glad the city of God. Okay, in other words, it causes us to have this joy within us. There's this river that makes glad the city of God, the holy dwelling places of the Most High. Now, when I look at that, throughout the Old Testament scriptures, there was a place that was considered the dwelling place of God, which is the word tabernacle. Okay? So there was this place that we would go to. Okay, that's ground zero. But here it's dwelling places, okay? Bunches of them. So the question, okay, this is it's kind of a test because we talked about it not too long ago. So it's a test to see how it works. I'm a professor, I give tests. Where does God dwell today? On earth, where does he dwell? She got it right. All the rest of you are still thinking about it. Okay, where does he dwell? Here. I'm like a mobile tabernacle. Dwells inside of me here. And it says that the river in Psalm 46, the river comes to each dwelling place and causes it to flourish. I don't have time to go to everyone. So you guys get watered, the rest of you dry. But you get the picture of it, right? It waters this, and there's the river of delights that makes me glad, that lifts my spirits, and it's about him. He is the one who gives us life, that brings life into whatever's going on in life. These pictures that he gives us. And then he comes down to the bottom line on this. That in your light, we see light. He's kind of brings it all down. He says, it changes the dynamic of things. The first 4 verses, I see light through my own eyes. In other words, the wisdom I have is based on how I think and what I think is right. My truth is my truth, all that kind of craziness. But David brings it down to this. In your light, we see light. Which causes you, if nothing else, causes you to kind of stop and say, so what do you mean? C.S. Lewis made this statement. He says, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. Isn't that cool? It's cool enough to say it again, doesn't it? Okay, so you can kind of lock it in. I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. It's a completely different way of thinking that comes out of this. Got these 2 things going on here. The first one ends up with no one to thank because you remove that picture on it. The second one, my whole way of thinking sees God in everything and behind everything. And so that as I'm giving thanks, yes, I'm acknowledging all that he has provided for me, but ultimately I'm thanking the giver. Because how I see the giver shapes how I respond to the gifts. And these 2 ways of thinking shape how we actually give thanks. And to whom I give thanks. The psalm isn't over. Notice how it ends. Starting in verse 10, it says, continue your loving kindness to those who know you, and your righteousness to the upright in heart. Let not the foot of pride come upon me, and let not the hand of the wicked drive me away. There the doers of iniquity have fallen. They have been thrust down and cannot rise. So when it comes down to this, David actually prays. It's just as those last verses are David's prayer. Someone in our home group this week brought up the idea, I wonder if David puts this prayer in here because he struggles between those 2 mindsets. I think she was onto something. Because we all do. We all find ourselves, particularly in the time and place we live, although it probably isn't that dramatically different than any other time or place. We all find ourselves throughout the day struggling with who is going to be the center of our life and how do we see things. Is God marginalized and I'm the one on my throne and the authority of my life and I define how life works and I see everything through my grid on this thing? Or is life about the one who has given me the kidney, who's given me life? And I see everything through him. In his light, I see light. That I see him as the one who provides security in my life. I see him as the one who feeds my soul. I see him as the one who brings life into me and the delights that come with it. It's about him. So, as we go into the week, what my desire is that we kind of look at our self-talk. What are we telling ourselves? And think through how much of the first 4 verses is invading my life and how much of the next set of verses is invading my life. And David's prayer becomes our prayer. Lord, I long for your hesed to continue. In fact, the word continue has the idea of dipping out from like the vessels of wine that you dip out instead of taking like one little cup, but pouring it out. That's what the word actually means. Pour it out on me. Lord, don't let me go to the first 4 verses. That's David's prayer. Don't let me live there, because I know that it's a dead-end street. Don't let me go there. Let's pray here. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege of being here and of tuning our inner being and turning the dials in there and looking inside ourselves and allowing you to probe the kind of self-talk that goes into us, the kind of heartbeat that pulses in us. Our Father, this provides us with such a great week for us to kind of reset how we see life and how we talk about life within ourselves, how we process it. We desire to be those who thank not the gifts, but the giver. We thank you for what you will be doing as we take this psalm and live it into life now. Thank you in Jesus' name.